The war between the two begins almost with the advent of Islam. Islam was not a local cult. It was not intended just to bring their own version. There are passages in the Quran which seem to imply this, but they have not been understood or interpreted in that sense. I'm sure that everybody in this room has been to the Dome of the Rock. You've all seen the inscription inside, which says very clearly, God is one, he has no companion, he does not beget, he is not begotten. A clear declaration of war against a central dogma of the Christian religion. The Caliph at the same time struck gold coins, a breach of Roman copyright. Until then, only the Romans and the Byzantines after them had struck gold coins, and this was a sort of world-recognized privilege. The Caliph struck his own gold coins and put the same inscriptions on them. A clear declaration of war, saying in effect to the Byzantine emperor, your religion is superseded, your scriptures are corrupted, your time has passed, move over, we are taking over the world. And that was the beginning of this long struggle, which in various forms has continued ever since. It came in several phases. The first is the Arab phase, when the Arabs came out of the Arabian Peninsula, who were previously alone, they had lived, and conquered vast territories eastward from the emperors of Iran and beyond. More important for our present purpose, westward, where they conquered what were then the Christian countries, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, North Africa, and went beyond into Europe, conquering Spain, Portugal, and a large piece of southern Italy, including the whole of Sicily. A little later, the Tatars of the Golden Horde, who were not themselves Muslims originally, but were converted to Islam, conquered Russia and established an Islamic regime in Eastern Europe, which was also advancing westwards towards Poland, while the Arabs in Spain and Sicily were advancing northwards into France. And we even hear of a raid, an Arab raid into Switzerland, the purpose of which is not quite clear. Perhaps they wanted to open bank accounts, I don't know. The attempt to conquer Europe this time failed. There was what is known in Spanish history as the Reconquista, the reconquest, the recovery of Spain and Portugal and Sicily from its Moorish conquerors, to use the terminology of the time. But it was not possible to recover North Africa. North Africa had also been part of Christendom. This time it remained and still remains part of Islam. Excuse me. The attempt was not limited to the reconquest of Western Europe. There was also an attempt to reconquer the Holy Land, the place where we are sitting talking now. For Christians, of course, this had a special importance. This was where Jesus was born and lived and died, where the foundations of their faith were laid. It has the same importance for Christians as Mecca and Medina do for Muslims. And Muslims have been more fortunate in that their holy cities and their holy land have never suffered alien or infidel occupation. For Christians and Jews, that was not true. And on the contrary, the Christian Jewish Holy Land was conquered and occupied. The Crusades represent an attempt to recover the Christian Holy Land and the Christian holy places. The discussion of the Crusades nowadays is an interesting example of the reshaping, retelling of history at the present time in terms of political correctness, multiculturalism, and the rest. We have even seen the spectacle of a pope apologizing to the Muslims for the Crusades. Now, I have no desire to serve as an apologist for the Crusaders. Their cruelty and brutality, not only against Muslims, but also against Jews, and even against Eastern Christians, anybody with a beard, in fact, is well known. But to describe this, as it is nowadays described, as a wanton, unprovoked attack on a peaceful, inoffensive neighbor, is just preposterous. Let's look back a bit. In the year 846, that is some time before the Crusades, in the year 846, the Arabs, having conquered North Africa, Sicily, a good piece of mainland Italy in the south, raided Rome. A naval expedition seized the port of Ostia, went into Rome, sacked St. Peter's, and then left. The Pope of the time, Leo IV, proclaimed a crusade. A little later, his successor, John VIII, offered divine rewards to those who perished in this crusade to save Christendom from the attackers. The immediate provocation of the Crusades was a change in the power, the ruling powers in the Holy Land, and serious obstacles placed in the way of Christian pilgrims visiting their sacred places. One might, I think, one other rather interesting feature, that in the Crusade propaganda, which was put out by at least two popes and by various other Christian leaders, in the propaganda calling people to join in the crusade, they talk a great deal about the rewards which the crusaders will earn in the afterlife. It seems that they had been studying the enemy, which is always a useful thing to do in wartime, and were adapting some of the enemy methods to their own purposes. It didn't work, as you know. The Crusades failed. The Crusaders were driven out of the Holy Land and adjoining areas. And although the reconquest of Europe was completed in the West, the rest remained under Muslim rule. And the best that one can say about the Crusades is that they represented a late, limited, and ineffectual attempt to imitate the jihad, even to the extent of offering similar rewards.